Hello, everybody, and welcome to Funk Headquarters on a Saturday afternoon on a rainy, cloudy day in New Orleans. And it's time for One Finger at a Time piano lessons, which we've been doing for 6 months, so you all must be getting pretty good at it by now. I think, who knows?
This is volume 25.
Lesson 25?
Lesson 25, yeah.
Is it?
Yep.
Wow.
I would not joke about something as serious as that.
God forbid that you should be flippant about the One Finger at a Time piano lessons.
Especially on your 25th.
25th anniversary.
Yeah, what is that, silver? Gold?
God,
I don't know.
Who knows? Who cares? So I thought today, and there's a million different directions you can go in with this stuff, and it is a real challenge trying to select useful information over the airwaves for people watching who are at different stages of or levels of experience and ability with the piano. So as I often say, I don't want to give stuff that's too complicated for people who are new to it, and at the same time I don't want to cater exclusively the really basic stuff for people who are new to it and leave the others who've been doing it for longer frustrated because they already know it. So I'm always trying to pitch it somewhere in the middle. But the important thing about this is a bit like learning a language, really. A lot of music lessons can concentrate on the theory, and it ends up being like a mathematics class or like an IQ test or something. All you want to do is just play a song. And if you like New Orleans music, all you want to do is just be able to sit down and just be able to play something. So that's really the kind of, in the same way as with learning a language, it's much more valuable if you're just going on holiday somewhere to learn some conversational vocabulary and a few expressions, and be able to enjoy the delight of actually communicating in a foreign language. This is kind of what this is like. It's communicating in a foreign language. Communicating. I'm having a hard time communicating in English this morning. God dear me. So I try and give you a little bit of both. Something that's a bit sophisticated, because New Orleans music is sophisticated, but also fun and easy to play. Most of these lessons have been in C, because it's a good launching point. If you can get your head around it in C, which is very visual on the keyboard, then once the lesson is over, you can set about trying to play the same things in other keys, and that's really where it takes off if you have a talent for this. Is when you start to figure stuff out for yourself and make some logical, daring equations in your mind, and then try them out in practice and find they actually work. So if this is C and this is C seventh, then if this is F, then that must be F seventh. All right, well, if that's F seventh, then what happens when you get to G? Well, that must be G seventh, and that's a kind of logical process. Then you're on your way, and then that's kind of how I learnt to play when I was a little kid. Just doing, if that does that, then this must do that. So bear in mind, I've been doing this for 50 years, half a century. And I'm still trying to figure it out, because one of the delights and one of the frustrations of music is that it's a never-ending adventure, and that after many years of playing, when you think you've achieved a degree of dexterity and knowledge of the understanding of how it's all put together, what it has done, in fact, is to very well acquaint you with all the stuff that lies outside your reach and beyond your grasp, and how many more hills there are to climb and mountains to cross and rivers to cross. And it's a big expanding panorama of music. But the fun part is in the early part, because you're making the big discoveries. So, all right, well, there's C, there's C major, this C major is the same as this C major, except this one's an octave lower. And C major is a standard building block. It's basically a major chord comprised of 3 notes. But as we've said before, there are all manner of things you can do to adjust the chords, and in so doing, you give them certain qualities. And so, for just changing one of the notes, for example, you could do this, you could do that, make it C minor, which all of a sudden has a melancholy quality. We've covered that a few times in a couple of early lessons. You could change your thumb and go like this. And at first, you might think, "Oh, that doesn't sound very nice. It sounds like it's out of tune. Sounds wrong, even." Well, it might do unless you put it in this context. If you want something to play with, that's the first chord. Tell it like it is. Lonely, lonely nights. There've been so lonely, lonely nights. So that's just changing one note. Change to here. That sounds kind of nice. That's actually an A minor and a different inversion. If you went one more, C seventh. One more, C major seventh. All these varieties are to be learned and are there to inform your playing. There was one we hit on which I'm going to go on today, because this is a good form for general roustabout New Orleans rhythm and blues. It's just a nice voicing of C seventh, which is really the blues chord, the 7th chord. Here's C. Take your thumb and play this note, B flat on top. So if you've got a tempo that's going like this, you can go. Okay, so 2nd chord. Here's the 1st chord, C seventh, C, E, and B flat. It's nice. It's nice, that chord. I like that chord. There's different ways you could play a C seventh with a 9 on top. You could play it here. You could play it there. There's lots of varieties. This is a real basic one. It's easy to get your hands around. Just reminded me of that Beatles song. That's the last time I'm telling you to say I'm gonna let you down and leave you flat. Gonna let you down and leave you, because I told you before, oh, you can't do that. Now that'd be good. That's the kind of New Orleans.
Isn't that Money also by the Beatles? Give me money.
Money, yeah, give me money. That's what I want. That's what I want. That's what I want. The best things in life are free, but you give to the birds and bees. I want money. Anyway, you get the idea. So you can use it in all those, that kind of sound. James Booker used to play that kind of groove a lot of the time. So there's your C seventh. Now watch this. There's your F seventh. Very interesting. What have you done to make an F seventh out of a C seventh? You've changed 2 notes. You've changed them by the same amount in the same direction. This stays the same. You've taken these 2 notes, that's C seventh, and you've gone like that. And that's F seventh. And it's very pleasing to the ear because the shift is very gradual. Much more pleasing to the ear than if you went. Nothing wrong with that. It's just a bit ungraceful. a bit ungainly, a bit jumpy, a bit jerky. This is smooth. You've just done a little twist, a little whoopsie-do. So just practice this, play along with me with this thing. So if that's F, I'm going to give you another example of how logic and reason can be a tool you can utilize to figure stuff out for yourself. Use logic. Let's recap on what we just learned. That's C seventh. That's F seventh. So if that is F seventh, look at F. That's your basic chord of F. This doesn't look anything like it. Except when you look hard, you'll see, well, yes it does really, because it's got an A in it. There's A. It's got a C in it. There's C. This is F. If I wanted to play that note, then it would be an F seventh, just a different inversion. Well, what's the difference between, here's an F seventh and you want to find out what a G seventh is. What's the difference between F and G? Well, there's F. We know that because it goes A, B, C, D, E, F. And there's G. G is literally one whole note or two half notes, two half steps higher than F. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. So if that's F seventh, then this must be G seventh. So start again. C seventh. C. That's the note we've added. And then we found out that the next chord in our little blues romp is F seventh. And I've shown you that the easiest way to get from C seventh to F seventh, and the pleasingest way, is to change these two down a half step. Remember, when you go down one note like that, musicians call that a half step. If you go down two, it's a whole step. So drop these by a half step. If you play that. And G, that's F seventh. G is a whole step higher than F. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And so if you take each of these notes and go up one, two times, that's G. So you've got the three chords you need for a basic blues or an R&B. C, F, and G. And these are just three versions of the chords of C, F, and G. There are other versions which you can use, and you will use as your vocabulary gets bigger. But for right now, let's just play these and just get used to them. So just play along with me, because this is really now where you're using your left hand, which is traditionally for right-handed people, who are most of the population, a weaker appendage, but it needs to be strong, because in the piano your left hand is laying down the law. Okay, so I started out showing it a pretty basic left hand. It's not very graceful. It all sounds a bit infantile, really. It doesn't matter because it's just part of what you do with two hands. So in your right hand, just play along with me for a little bit. C. So this is going to keep you really, really busy if you can stick with it and enjoy stumbling over the hurdles as a beginner piano player. Because in here,
Got a couple of questions.
questions, okay.
There's two questions here. Are seventh chords 4 notes or 3? And then the other question is, oh, somebody answered it, 4, but can be implied with just 2 notes, the third and the 7th. Is that right?
Could be 2, could be 3, could be 4, and could be more than that.
Show a few.
Well, in this instance, I'll just recap. Here's C. Here's the chord of C major. I'll just give you a bit of technical understanding. This major scale of C is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And in that instance, the 7th lies on this. And that sounds weird because it's the 7th note of the major scale. And there are two scales, well, actually several scales. But in the major scale, the 7th lands on this note. And a major 7th sounds like this. C with a major 7th added. Which is very soul, it's a kind of a smoochy R&B gentle chord. The 7th note of the minor scale, however, lands on this note, which is much more vinegar and salt. And so, in this instance, I'm playing a C7th chord, and there are 4 notes in the chord. If I wanted to leave this note out, that's still a C7th. That's the one we've been using. If I want to keep this one in and leave this one out, it's still a C7th. If I leave both of them out, technically it's still a C7th, but it's lacking some of the other information that puts it in context, that roots it, which is either one of these notes. You can add notes to a 7th. I could add these. It's a pretty ugly chord, but you mean I've just added another. I don't even know what that was, but that, I mean, it's still a chord. It's not a particularly nice one. And this C7th chord, I've added a 9. Remember, this was 7, 8, 9. I've taken this note, which is the 5th, or 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and flattened it, and then added this, which is a 6, and you're in sort of you're going off in Thelonious Monk territory there, the flatted 5th, the interval that the beboppers loved. Interestingly, in medieval times that was called the devil's interval. And in some ecclesiastical musical context, you were forbidden from playing that because it was said to be devilish. As dangerous as stirring your porridge the wrong way round.
Invoke the devil.
So that's in answer to your question. There are lots of different ways of playing a 7th chord. And they can involve many notes, or they can involve simply 3 notes, really. For it to be a chord, it really needs to have 3 notes. So here is C7th, the one I'm using now. And here is F7th. And what's interesting about this is all I've done is change 2 notes. And this illustrates the point that chords, in this instance an F7th, can be played in a variety of ways. I could play it like this, or I could play it like that, or I could play it like this, or I could play it like that. I mean, I'm adding extra notes here, but it's still basically an F7th chord. So this is one that's pleasing to the ear because it doesn't jump around too much. It's the difference between a writer's well-crafted sentence and a poor writer's badly crafted sentence. You understand the meaning, but there's alliteration in a well-crafted sentence. The chosen vocabulary expresses the idea better than the other ways that were available to the author, and the same is true of the musician. That's often what separates the good musicians from the not so good musicians, is their understanding of all the different ways to play the chords. And so here in this instance, because we're running out of time, what I've tried to teach you is a very hip left-hand voicing for the blues and for rhythm and blues. That's C7th, F7th, G7th, and back to C7th. And what I was demonstrating before was that you can play what people call the blues scale. I don't like to think in terms of a blues scale. That's too limiting, I think. You need to open your ears up and listen to what sounds good. But I was demonstrating to you here with C. Start there, and we've done this before, these little grace notes. And remember in C, you're playing this note here, which is an E with nothing done to it, so it's natural. That's why they call it an E natural. And then when you play the F7th, that's the note we need. And that's an E flat. You wouldn't play this. What makes the blues so sexy and so dangerous and so enduring is precisely the value that is attached to this note here in the context of C. And as we've said on many programs before, that note, the third note, makes the difference between C major and C minor. Two chords which have many similarities, but when this tiny little difference is made, it shifts hugely the effect that it has on your emotions. Nobody understands why this chord invokes melancholy, ambiguity, darkness, like dark green, purple colours. But it does. And here then the blues has value and an enduring quality precisely because in the hands of good musicians that particular ambiguity there is milked as much as is possible. And you can do it in very basic ways like this. Let me play the seventh chord like I was showing this one. It's like. In very early jazz or very early, we go back to the 40s where you'd hear the elements of this creeping into popular culture and being taken on by Gershwin. Well, that was a bit earlier, but trying to incorporate this thing, which is actually kind of anachronistic to Western music. It was always done in a clumsy way. It's like, and I woke up this morning and I really got the blues. Yes, I woke up this morning. You know, it's like that was stiff kind of thing of people getting it all wrong. But you will do for ages until you get nuanced with it. But that's what you're doing, is playing with the ear by deciding whether to play the minor or the major. And sometimes doing both, but going from this one, you can't finish on that because it's the wrong thing to finish on. So you correct it at the end. And then while in that process between playing dissonant, out of tune note, and then fixing it, in that short gap is where the pleasure lies, because you're sowing the seed of anticipation in the listener's ear, who's thinking it can't stay there. And when it does correct itself, it's like, okay, that feels better now. That's in microcosm. But anyway, that's something to play with. So 3 chords: C 7th, F 7th, G 7th. Now play the blues and get used to going. Notice when you go to the F 7th, look, playing the E flat. When we get to the C, it's landing on the major, but soften it, otherwise it sounds too happy. Anyway, so there's a bunch of stuff to be going on with the blues. All right, I hope that was good. And thank you for tuning in. Thank you for all the generous tips. And time for me to go back into the studio and carry on working on my new record. Yeah. Special thanks to She Who Must Be Obeyed.
Thank you.
Yawning behind the
Thank
mic.
you. Yeah.
25 hours of your life you'll never get back.
No, it's only a half hour.
Ah.
So it would be 12 and a half hours.
12 and a
of my
half
life
hours.
that
That's
I'll
not so
never get
bad when
back.
you think of it like that. Thanks, everybody. Next week.
Tuesday
ya.
is.
Oh, Tuesday's quarantine hour.
Yep.
Yeah. All right, cool. And these lessons, if you're digging them, are available on the Patreon site,
Yeah,
which I started a couple of months ago in July.
They stay up here for a week.
They're up for a week, and then they go to the Patreon site. Go to patreon.com and type in my name, and all this piano lessonage is there for your delectation. All right. Cheers.